Thanks for listening in today with us at Woke News, your new source for non biased news and information. I've here today James Terry, who is looking to take office as sheriff for Hernando County Sheriff Office. Please tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Martin. I'm James Terry, and I'm running for sheriff of Hernando County. I served at Hernando County for 20 years. I was major of operations when I retired from there, and in addition to that, I worked for Brooksville Police Department when I started my career for 2.5 years. I've had an opportunity to work with so many different agencies within the county, and I feel like having come up through the ranks and learned all of the different parts of the county, the different challenges the county faces, what the fabric is that holds each of our different sub-communities together, I feel like I'm the person that can really unite this county and bring the proper and safe law enforcement to Hernando County that she deserves.
What do you think about your previous sheriff and chief that you worked under? Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, Martin, I think the sheriff's done well with the background that he has. Unfortunately, he does not have a sufficient foundational experience, is what I call it. He didn't come up through the ranks. He never worked the road as a deputy sheriff. He came up in a completely different law enforcement agency, and alcohol, bureau, and tobacco to the state, where it's very much administrative, checking licenses and so forth. And it's really hard to build off the foundation that's already there when you haven't learned and understood that foundation. And it's really hard to move the agency forward unless you have a solid footing to go on. So I really feel like the agency has kind of stayed still for the last 9 years. All of the administrative functions that make the place work and function, and all of the things that make it special, are really carryovers from the Nugent regime.
And why should citizens vote for you as our next sheriff?
I feel that the citizens should vote for me because I feel like our county is starving for strong leadership, honest answers, get away from the politics and the political answers. People want direct answers to the questions. They want direct leadership. They want somebody who's going to stand strong and not always have the political answer, but have a real answer. I feel like there's a major lack of transparency in the agency currently. People want that transparency. I hear it all the time. They want somebody with the foundational experience that came up through like I did, that understands every nut and bolt of the sheriff's office, and that is going to address problems head on, and is going to be open with those problems with the community. And I look at it like this. I serve the people. It's their agency. You're not going to hear me saying my this, my that. The agency belongs to the people. I merely asked to be the steward to oversee it and run the day-to-day operations, but it's truly the people's agency. And and part of that transparency, we really need to get body cameras at Hernando County, and I think that's the direction that the county wants to go. I hear about it all the time. I have other very exciting ideas of programs to help out our most vulnerable, whether it's the elderly with Alzheimer's, or children in the autism spectrum, special needs children. Those are communities that are underserved, and there's programs out there I'm very excited about to help them. And then with my investigative background, we can be assured that Hernando County will have the premier investigative agency and that things will be done properly.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with you there, man. I think that there definitely needs to be some sort of accountability both on, the police and civilian side, and having body cameras really is going to make sure that that actually happens. Um, following up, are you actually prepared to work days, nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it takes to get the job done and not just, hide behind a desk?
Of course, Martin, I understand that being sheriff is a 24-hour commitment. You have to be available for the people, to serve the people at all times. And in this world we live in nowadays, you never know what's going to happen from one moment to the next. So I fully understand that there'll be a lot of hours being worked, and I'm ready, willing, and able to do so.
So, what did you least like about your last previous position? What would you change if given the opportunity?
Well, Martin, I'd have to say the thing I probably disliked the most was when politics bled into the daily work of working cases and protecting people. I also didn't like it when, you'd have an incident that would come up, and from time to time, whether it be a mistake or an error, and if it was something internal that wasn't in the public or didn't hit the newspaper, it would be handled appropriately and addressed and fixed as it should. The same exact offense would happen, and it would get outside the building. Maybe the media gets a hold of it, and there would be a total panic and an overreaction tenfold from what was done previously. That level of inconsistency made it very difficult to manage your staff and manage the expectations, because there really should be one way of dealing with matters, and it should be consistent across the board, regardless of who knows about it. Trying to keep the lid on things rather than just being open and say, yes, we had this problem, we addressed it. That's how I like to handle things, rather than have two sets of standards.
And what would you do to change that?
We need to get body cameras to protect our officers, protect our community, and be transparent. That is one of my number one goals going forward. We need to do a better job of doing stress management with our officers and taking care of our people. They see some really terrible things out there. PTSD affects them just like it affects people in the military. It's something we need to do a much better job of guarding. When they start struggling, it can lead to alcoholism and things like that. And we got to make sure we watch for those signs and get resources in place to help our deputies stay healthy, both physically and mentally, so they can properly serve our community. And the other big thing is just transparency. It needs to be a community agency. It needs to be the people's agency. And we need to, if there's a problem, it's all of our problem. We're all in it together. And that's the way the agency needs to be. And those are kind of a quick snapshot of some of the things I plan on changing as far as the core culture.
So what are the most significant law enforcement issues facing Hernando County over the next term?
I'd say right now the number one most important issue is maintaining trust with the community. You can do that through transparency. I know I keep bringing up body cameras, but I think that's crucial. Hernando County is not immune to having issues and having an uprising. We've been very fortunate we haven't had anything to date, but if we were so unfortunate to have an in-custody death and somebody starts claiming that the deputies acted improper or there was malfeasance or anything like that, if you don't have the video to show, it's very difficult to defend yourself, and things can get out of hand really quickly with the spread of social media. So I feel the biggest challenge going ahead is making sure that we're trusted by the community, we maintain that trust, and we are transparent. And the other challenge is going to be keep the agency moving forward as the population grows, and try to do it on a reasonable budget that doesn't put undue burden on our taxpayers.
And given our budget restraints, how would you stretch our taxpayer dollars and still deter crime?
Martin, one of the ways that we're going to make sure that we are very efficient in our use of the taxpayers' money, having all levels of operations be efficient is very important to make sure that you do not have to put unnecessary resources towards problem solving. One of the things we really got to take a look at, at some point, the sheriff's office can't be everything for everybody. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Currently, obviously, the main challenge, the main goal, the main job of the sheriff's office is to provide for people's safety. And the sheriff's office is involved in so many wonderful programs that I really enjoy. But there's so many of them that I'm aware of where really it's a duplicate service for what other different nonprofit entities are doing right now. So I feel like there's a way to really streamline a lot of that and have a lot more partnerships rather than the sheriff's office having standalone programs.
So what would you say is the biggest need of the sheriff department now, and how would you fill that need? What would you do to address that?
I think the biggest need right now for the sheriff's office, I know I mentioned it numerous times already, but they need to have body cameras. They need to have transparency to keep the trust in the community. I feel like they also need an entire culture shift. When I was coming up under former administrations, it was really the core reason to be there, and the belief of everyone was to serve the citizens. It was about a servant attitude and being there for the citizens, and that's what drove you, and that's what bled down from the top all the way down to the bottom of the agency, because that's what the leaders believed in. If you look at what's going on now with the rise of social media and how much social media is used in the sheriff's office, it's really so much of look at us, look at me, look what we've done. And it's gotten to what I call the credit culture, where things are really done for Facebook clicks and to get credit for things rather than just because it's part of your servant attitude, rather than just because it's part of your duty to serve the citizens, or if it's just plain old goodwill. You need to get back to that servant attitude, that it's not about any individual, it's not about the person, it's not about the credit, it's about the people and serving the people.
How can you reduce the time law enforcers must spend in court so they can be patrolling, investigating, and doing their job?
I would say the best way to reduce time that officers spend in court is to make sure you have a philosophy and you have accountability on your cases, that every T is crossed, every I is dotted. You hold that standard, knowing what's expected in court, knowing what is needed in court for the prosecution. If your case is rock solid when you turn it over to the state for prosecution, you will have 99% of the people that will take a plea agreement because their attorney will tell them, I cannot get you out of this case. Your best thing to do is take a plea agreement, serve your time, take your probation, whatever it may be.
So what policy changes and training regimens specifically are you planning on implementing for the Hernando County Sheriff Office?
Some of the changes we're going to bring regarding policy at the Sheriff's Office: we're going to have body cameras for transparency. We're going to have those required on all patrol deputies out in the field when they're in contact with the public. I think that's very important for accountability purposes. We're looking to implement a GPS bracelet tracking program, which I'm very passionate about. These GPS bracelets are used predominantly on people with cognitive issues, children with special needs, autism, the elderly with dementia and Alzheimer's. Those bracelets are used, and you can track and find those people instantly if you have that program within the sheriff's office, as opposed to right now when a special needs child or somebody who's elderly and has dementia wanders. It ties up half the county's resources trying to find that person, and that search can go on for hours. And where that's really crucial is when you're talking about a special needs person, they are in danger every moment they are away from their home base. And that's something I'm very passionate about. It's something that I know we can get started through grant programming, and I know there's a whole lot of people that would help us raise some additional funding, supply bracelets for those in need. That's something I'm really excited to get started. Going along with that, our special needs community is really underserved. I have so many people I've met that are afraid for what will happen with their children if they encounter police, because they are special needs and you cannot necessarily tell from looking at them. And they may be acting out, which can be perceived from the officer as being violent, but it's really part of the condition that the child has. And I have several people who are very passionate and want to actually bring their children in to explain their fears, explain their children's behavior. That goes much further than teaching cops something from a book. Cops tend to tune out academics, but they do listen to mothers and parents and children and people who are passionate and say, these are the things I'm afraid of. So that's something I plan on bringing to make sure we have advanced training in regard to that. Another thing I really think they need to work on is the state guidelines for officer self-defense are very poor. They really do not teach a whole lot of different techniques and how to subdue people. The training on it is very limited. We just recently saw an incident where, what starts as a sort of a wrestling match to try to gain custody of a person, the subject escapes, takes the officer's taser, ultimately winds up leading to a shooting incident. And, if there is better techniques in how to control an individual and you're actually taught more of these techniques, maybe that subject doesn't break free. Maybe he doesn't get your taser. And we're not doing a good enough job of training officers for self-defense.
So yeah, the incident that you're referring to is the incident that happened in Atlanta recently, and where Rayshard Brooks, who was shot by police officers who failed to subdue him after he resisted arrest, and he grabbed a taser and took off and shot at the officer chasing him, which the officer took a shot at him, and unfortunately, because of the wounds, Rayshard Brooks did die in the hospital. Um, I think that honestly, better training is the best solution. I mean, I know high school wrestlers who could have taken and has better control and training than some of these police officers. It's quite frankly a joke. Um, Moving forward, how do you plan to handle Hernando County Sheriff officers personnel under your appointment in regards to policy violations and reprimands? If you could please elaborate on a couple extreme polar opposite situations, abusing power, like this George Floyd type situation, or something like a clerical error.
Martin, I think the most important thing when you're talking about discipline procedures within an agency is to be fair and be consistent. There's been many incidents I've seen where two different deputies would do the exact same offense and receive a different level of discipline, and that cannot be. It needs to be consistent. If one offense is a written reprimand for one person, it should be the same for the other. I really feel like at the beginning level of any issues, the number one phase is always training and discussion. And that's where the sergeants are really the key when you have the young deputies, of molding them. And, obviously from there you follow progressive discipline as needed, but ideally you try to deal with the issues at the line level. You try to deal with it through mentoring. You try to deal with it through counseling. And, them to remember, listen, accountability is not a bad thing. It just means that we're making you as professional as possible. And very often that accountability can keep deputies from making bigger mistakes that may cause them more problems down the road. So if you address the little things early and mold them into that professional, get them to expect from themselves that level of professionalism that you expect as a leader, then I think that goes a long way. The big thing is, though, they need to know that there is accountability, and they need to know that it's fair. And, obviously they need to know that there's certain things that there is going to be a zero tolerance. Obviously there are things that you cannot do progressive discipline on. If you have an abuse of power, or somebody uses excessive force like we saw in the George Floyd case, that's not something you will have an option of progressive discipline, because it rises immediately to the highest level and you have to take immediate action. And that's where, again, I go back to the body cameras are very important, because anybody who sees that footage knows you can take immediate action. We need to do a better job of teaching them how to handle themselves in physical confrontation to contain the suspect. That's kind of one of the downfalls of the less lethal options at times. The taser is a very effective tool. It works very well. The problem is, though, when you can become completely reliant upon that and the taser doesn't work, if the deputy doesn't know what to do then and can't go hands-on and control a suspect and maintain control, that's where you can get yourself in trouble and get hurt. And like I said earlier, a lot of it I feel falls back to the agency not providing the proper training and bringing in people that can teach some really good ground techniques, some really good containment techniques. And there's plenty of them out there, but it's really lacking right now in the agency.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there because I feel like a lot of our officers definitely do not have that hand-on-hand control. Like I said, mentioned earlier, I wasn't kidding. There are definitely high school wrestlers and college level wrestlers. I have a lot more control than a police officer does in a lot of these situations. So my question is to you now is how will you work with Hernando County Sheriff Officer deputies to be better suited in handling people with mental illnesses or who are not in the right state of mind?
The issue of mental illness is affecting the entire nation and law enforcement. And it's something I am very passionate about. I think what you have to do to deal with that is you have to make sure that it's something that is constantly discussed and something that is constantly brought into discussion about how you're going to deal with this situation when it comes up. And you have to just train on it and train on it. And similar to what I talked about with the special needs kids, you need to bring in trainers who can share real life experiences. And it can't just be things from a book. Law enforcement learns a lot better when they can hear real life scenario stories of how things went down and how maybe things went bad. Maybe an officer took some action against somebody who was mentally ill that there could have been a different way to handle it. You know, if they see those cases and they see those case reviews, you know, it goes a long way because none of the officers want to hurt anyone. You know, that's not what they get into the business for. And last thing they want to do is hurt somebody who's either mentally challenged or, you know, mentally ill at the time. You know, if there's a way out of it, they always want to find that. So I think we just got to give them the tools to recognize those things and train on it heavily and make it a matter of importance for the agency that we put that at the forefront to make sure we always are mindful of how to deal with those situations.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. According to the 2019 FDLE crime report statistics, there has been an increase of 55.7% of arrests in Hernando County, the majority being young males. What community outreach programs will you be implementing to reduce the increase of arrest of young men?
Regarding programs for children, again, I go back to kind of like we said with the programs, whether you're trying to feed the hungry or things like that, you have to have partnerships. There's plenty of other places out there doing after school programs, sports programs. We need to partner with them. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and do our own particular thing. We need to be involved in those programs, be integrated in those programs, and we need to be part of the county as a whole. You know, you see the ongoing budget battles over the years, and first thing they start talking about cutting is parks. We're going to close the parks. We're going to close the libraries. Well, you know, I want to be part of that discussion because I don't look at the budget solely as a sheriff's office budget. I look at the sheriff's office budget as part of the whole community package. And if you shut down parks and you shut down libraries and, you know, children don't have places to go, then they're going to be out getting themselves into trouble. So I think it's very important to integrate in the programs that exist. And I think it's very important to be part of solutions to make sure that we do have good, safe parks and places for children to go and entertain themselves in a healthy way through sports, through having good places to spend time together that are safe and well lit, that officers can come by and visit with them and check on them. I think just the whole community engagement and partnerships, that's the key, partnerships.
Absolutely. There's definitely a need to have a place for kids, teenagers to go. We do have a lot of community programs, and I would like to see them step up to the table. And if you can be a part of that, I would love for you to do that. It would be great. My last question for you is, you know, as Hernando County population continues to grow at an exponentially high rate, how will you utilize technology to enforce traffic and pedestrian safety on our roadways? Have you considered adding red light cameras to major intersections?
Martin, technology is a great tool to use in traffic enforcement. They have many modern laser radars now that make it more efficient than the old radar systems that they had. I'd really like to see a little bit more use of camera systems in heavy traffic intersections. Ideally even that could be live monitored. We're probably a good ways away from having something like that. But at the end of the day, with traffic enforcement, it really comes down to having the deputies there able to take action and trained to take action regarding traffic enforcement and education. That's really the key, is you need people to perform that task. It's really not an electronic task, so to speak. The red light cameras, that is an electronic task, but that's not something I'm a fan of. You snap a picture of a tag, you don't necessarily know who's driving, the ticket automatically goes to the owner of the vehicle. That's not the burden of proof that I'm used to having to establish, and I don't really think it's an acceptable burden of proof. Primarily, I've seen before they've been used as a revenue generator much more than an education or problem-solving tool. So I would have to say that I really have no interest in doing red light cameras.
Thanks, James, for answering some popular questions that many Hernando County voters have regarding your future tenure as our elected sheriff. I'm sure we will talk again, and I hope that you will improve our sheriff department so that Hernando County can be the example by which all local law enforcement is measured by.
Martin, I'd like to thank you and Woke News for the opportunity to answer these important questions. I really ask the community to come together as we take a step forward for positive change in Hernando County. Ask everyone to please like, subscribe, and share this video, and help us spread the message about our campaign for Hernando County Sheriff. We want to bring positive change, and please, everybody, remember to vote on August 18th. That is the primary, and that's when the next sheriff of Hernando County will be decided. Thank you.